My parents pulled me out of college for dating a black guy and now I am engaged to him. I always knew my parents were racist, but I never thought they would literally force those views on me. When I was 19 and a freshman in college, I started dating one of my classmates, Chris. Even then I knew he was the love of my life, and was so excited to bring him home. But as soon as Chris walked through the door, my parents clearly had an issue with him. The entire evening they could barely make eye contact with Chris and directed most of their questions to me. When I tried to include him in the conversation, they abruptly changed the subject or straight up left the room, claiming to need the bathroom or a glass of wine, though by the fourth or fifth time it was obvious to everyone that it was an excuse. When I finally couldn't take the awkwardness, I went to confront them and found them together in the hallway, talking about how Chris was not good enough for me and that they could not let this relationship continue. When I asked what the F their problem was, they went silent and just shrugged. Finally, my mother just said she was disappointed in my choices, and paying for my college to improve my life, not limit my options. My father also chimed in and said that there had to be partners that were a better match for me and my potential. I could not believe my parents were writing off my relationship before even getting to know the man that I had spent months bragging about on the basis of skin color. I tried to make them understand that someone's complexion was quite literally the least relevant quality for determining a good partner, but they wouldn't listen. They were both raised in conservative religious households and clearly considered Chris to be unworthy because of his background. So, Chris and I had no choice but to date secretly and hope they would come around in time. They didn't. Even worse, when they found out I was still seeing him, they pulled me out of Temple University at the end of my freshman year and forced me to transfer out to a school closer to my hometown in Alabama, claiming they needed to keep an eye on me and that they should not have let me live so far north in the first place. I tried to fight them on it, but didn't have many options because I was so dependent on their financial support. Chris and I tried to stay in contact, but we were kids with no cars, living hours apart and banned from seeing one another. Eventually, we just fell out of touch and I was forced to move on. After I transferred to Auburn, I dated a few guys, but they were all the same, boring and white. But of course, my parents loved every single one of them, because they were rich, and fit whatever superficial image they had of my life. When I finally graduated, I decided that I was done being financially manipulated by my parents and having my dating life controlled by their outdated values. I took a nursing job, paid my own bills and actually started to build a life that reflected who I was as a person. And then, a few years later, my hospital was absorbed by another, and when the nurses were introduced to the board, Chris was on it. We recognized each other immediately, and though several years had passed, it truly felt like nothing had changed, besides the fact that we could date without facing the wrath of my parents and the assumptions they made about Chris and his potential. We have been engaged now for a year, and I haven't spoken to my parents for that same amount of time. And honestly, I don't think I will again.